Values here on a Tuesday, bringing you the latest from your questions that you have about college basketball, what's been on your mind recently when we talk about this sport. And got 3 questions here that we're going to roll through today. Try to keep it pretty concise, but we're going to start off talking about Jake Diebler at Ohio State. Some people starting to rumble, I guess, some fans already wondering, and this is pretty much inevitable, and it's why I'm not a big fan of the interim coach route, is that the second things start to look like they're not what the fan base hoped, immediately you start to wonder if you made the wrong decision. They don't get the same kind of benefit of the doubt of first year and he's got to get his players in. He's got to, no, it goes straight to, did we make a mistake promoting an interim coach into the full-time gig? Which leads us to our second question. Can Rodney Terry get Texas over the hump? We'll talk about that. What is the hump for Texas? Like, where is this bar that they're trying to reach? Can he take them there? And a little bit more on that Texas program. And then we'll close out today's show with coaches to watch at Miami. This is one that I've gotten quite a few times, actually. And I've got some thoughts. I've narrowed it down here to about 5 names. I think there's 5 names that you should keep an eye on at this point. Obviously, it's going to be months, probably 3 months at least, until we get a Miami hire, somewhere in that range at the very least. So I'm going to give you some names to watch. We'll see how it plays out. Obviously, none of these guys on the list, particularly 1 or 2 of them, are going to put their name into the race at all until their team's seasons are over. So let's go ahead and get started here. We'll talk about Jake Diebler at Ohio State, what he's done so far. Look, like I said at the start of the show, I'm not a huge fan of the interim coach route. I don't think that it's conducive necessarily to the type of long-term program building success that you want. And while it, especially in this era, does plug an immediate hole of roster retention and the ability to keep a recruiting class together. Those are 2 of the most important things in college basketball nowadays. But is it worth sacrificing that over the course of 1, maybe 2 years for having a coach who, and this is no slight against interims who are promoted to the full-time position, but if someone thought that he was ready in that moment to be a head coach of a program like Ohio State, he would have already had another opportunity. While some coaches do go from assistant coach at Ohio State straight into a head coaching job at a big-time school, the more common route is to go from assistant coach to a head coach, then to one of the premier programs in the sport. And so, while there are exceptions, Jake Diebler was not somebody who was universally thought of and talked about as one of those prime candidates to just jump immediately into this type of job. He is a promising up-and-coming coach. He has all the things that you want, but there was this refinement that people were looking for, that kind of process that you go through. So he jumps into the position, and he does so well at the end of last year that you think maybe he just does have it. And so they give him the job. He goes out, and I thought he put together a decent recruiting class, decent transfer class, and brings in this roster that's a little bit of a mismatch roster. It is his first year, after all. And this is the first time we're going to get to see, how does he want to play? What kind of players does he want to bring in? All of those types of things. And early on in the season, it worked quite a bit. Ohio State got into the top 25. I think people are forgetting that a little bit, that the AP voters thought that they were a top 25 team in the country not that long ago during the course of this season. And since that happened, he has had one of his best players, if not the best player, Aaron Bradshaw, have to be away from the team for off court reasons. So nothing he can do about that. Then return to the team. So he's got to reintegrate a player into his rotation, as well as dealing with the some of the common ups and downs of a first year as a head coach. And so we look at where they are now. They're 10-5. They're 1-2 on the road. So that's an area to look at. They're 2-5 in quad one, no quad two games, 2-0 in quad three, 6-0 in quad four. So they're 8-0 in the games that can hurt you come Selection Sunday. So there's really no issue that I see here. Look, Ohio State has not won just a massive number of games to this point, but they went through a coaching change for a reason. They kind of needed to reset the program. And so I'm not extremely concerned with a 10-5 record. Like I said, they've avoided all the bad losses. Every loss that they have is completely reasonable on their schedule. And then you look at where are they in bracketology? They're in the field. All right, where do they stand in the net rankings? 31st. That is plenty good enough. Like, that's going to get you into the NCAA tournament. Don't have to worry about that. Where does Kim Pom say you are? 32. So they're on the same page. Now, T rank, Bart Torvik, they've got you a little bit lower. They're at 51. But wins above the bubble, which is the new metric that the NCAA is looking at, similar to strength of record, they're 38th there. So they've played a pretty good schedule. And that is among the reasons that I'm not ready to hit any sort of panic button with Jake Diebler. Look, he's going to go through Big Ten play, and we're going to learn a lot about him as a coach, a lot about this team. And then when we can really start to gauge what he is first in X's and O's. Does he draw the right? Does Ohio State get a good look every time that they need a clutch basket? Are they out in the right defensive set every time that they need a stop? Those are the things you can judge him on this season. His ability to keep the team together, his ability to make them a better unit as a whole. These are the types of things that you want to look for. And then beyond that, it's going to be this offseason. Can he follow it up? Can he replace the players that he needs to replace? Can he retain the players that he needs to retain? How does that work? Where does he stand on the recruiting trail? Can he bring in a couple of guys? These are going to be the things that I think we're going to get a better picture of what Jake Diebler is as a coach. But so far, I think he's been pretty good. I have no concerns about him there at Ohio State, what he's going to be able to do. I think that you've seen other first-year coaches who were maybe the coach that some Ohio State fans wanted go through some of the similar struggles early on this season. Michigan being, of course, who I'm talking about. So while, yes, Dusty May's team is now in the top 25 again, Ohio State could easily get there if they go string some wins together in the Big Ten. We know the strength of conference that they're playing there. Now, as we move forward, we talk about Rodney Terry. This was another one, an interim hire where Chris Beard is fired midway through the season. Rodney Terry has to take over, and the program is kind of clinging to this really talented roster that went through some adversity, and Rodney Terry is going to steer the ship. That was the primary goal, was to just kind of hope that they could not waste what they had built that season. And he did well. They strung together wins. They played really well. I mean, as far as holding the ship down, he did about as good as you can. And so then they go into the offseason, and there's this talk that he coached too well to not get the job. And that's something that's frustrating for me when I look at these coaching searches. Because coaching too well to not give him the job doesn't really make sense. Now, if your options were hire some unproven assistant, somebody who is on the bench somewhere, but they're not the head coach, versus this assistant coach that we just promoted and we saw what he did. Okay, yeah, he would have the upper hand. But we're talking about an assistant coach who coached about a dozen basketball games with a really talented team. And we're going to compare that and say that because he won a certain number of those basketball games, that you can't hire this head coach with a proven track record of recruiting, of postseason success, of his philosophy, getting through to the players, all these things. And Rodney Terry, he also had head coaching experience before he returned to Texas as an assistant coach. Now, has his tenure been a disaster at Texas? No. They have been a good basketball team. And that's where I think that Texas has kind of gotten themselves into this weird spot. Because is Rodney Terry a bad basketball coach? By no means. Is he capable of all the job tasks that he needs to accomplish to be successful at Texas? Yes, I think so. But can he put it all together and get them over the hump? There's only a certain number of basketball coaches who I think are capable of consistently delivering the results that a school like Texas, with their investment, with their history, with everything that they, as a athletic program want to be about and accomplish. I don't know that he's in that elite class of coaches that can do that. And so where does that leave him? Because I don't think he's having a bad enough season, or that he will in the near future have a bad enough season that you say, all right, we can just cut ties and go get someone else. And I don't think that Rodney Terry is ever going to find himself in a position where you can fire him for any sort of reason. So he's 11-3. The computer metrics don't love them, but they have SEC play to prove themselves. They've got a really talented roster. They, like Ohio State, have avoided all of the bad losses to this point. They dealt with some health issues. Now they're back. They've got the full unit, and it looks like it could compete. But will it be enough to make them a real contender? And will he be able to make them a real contender here over the next few years? That's going to be the question for Rodney Terry. And then how long does he get to try to make them that type of contender? Going to be really interesting to follow what goes on there at Texas over the course of a while. I don't think it's a short-term issue that we're talking about here. But what is a short-term issue here is Miami's head coaching vacancy. We talked about on the last show Jim Laranaga's retirement, what it meant for college basketball, what it meant for Miami. And now they're in a position to hire a new head coach. They will not do so for, like I said at the start of the show, probably at least 3 months here. I guess they could after about 2.5 when teams start get eliminated from postseason play, whether that's their conference tournaments or the NCAA tournament. You would assume anyone that they're going after would probably be at least in the mix for an NCAA tournament spot. But I got 5 names. 5 names here, and then a bonus name that I'm going to kind of throw in here at the start with the first name to watch for the Miami opening. It, of course, is an opening that has probably some of the most interesting things to look for in a school. Do they have NIL funds available? Well, clearly they've gone out and they've gotten some big players. So yes, and the school we know has heavily invested in NIL across multiple sports. So you have to assume that they're going to have NIL resources. Obviously, it's a destination. It's Miami. And so what does that do for the coach? It's a destination both for the coach and for players who they can bring in. And with the transfer portal, I think that's even heightened with some of these veteran players looking to finish. Maybe they're a grad student. They're already graduated. They've got 1 more year of eligibility. Why not go spend it in Miami? But there's not this long list of historic success at that program. So what do you do with that? Is it sort of the sleeping giant? There will be coaches who view it that way. And so this first group of coaches, they have a familiarity. They know Miami. They know Jim Laranaga's system. So if the goal is, hey, look, Jim Laranaga ran a great program here. It just kind of fell apart as he fell out of love with the profession over these past couple of years. If that's what you think, if that's what they sit down, the search committee, the athletic director, whoever is running this, and that's what they feel at the end of the day, that Jim Laranaga falling out of love is what really hurt the Miami program, that everything was running smoothly before then. Well, then why not go get Chris Caputo from George Washington? Former assistant. He's young. He's had some success. Very bright young coach. I think it would be a good kind of continuation of an era fit there in Miami for him to be able to go in and immediately replace his former boss. Another name that this is kind of a bonus name I'm going to throw out there, Adam Fisher at Temple. He fits the same mold, just not quite the same pedigree, success, and so I'm not sure without Temple having much success whether he would be able to get the job. It's such a big job that we're going to talk about the next four candidates being some pretty high-end candidates. The next one being Speedy Claxton at Hofstra. Speedy Claxton, of course, does not have the big time resume of, oh, he's beat this team, he's recruited this player, all those things. But Speedy Claxton is widely respected within coaching circles, within the sport of basketball. He's a name that people know. So I don't have any questions about his ability to recruit, especially with NIL behind him. And I think that's another one of these kind of go in and bet on someone type of hires that you can make. Now, these next two are kind of rebound head coaches, although one of them, the rebound, has been quite a while. He's kind of settled in and found a nice home for himself. Anthony Grant at Dayton. Of course, he had a head coaching job years ago at Alabama, was not able to do it at the high major level, goes down a level to Dayton, and has risen them up into the conversation as one of the best mid-majors in college basketball. Year over year, they make it to the NCAA tournament. Had the best team in the country a few years ago before the pandemic shut down college basketball. So a very good coach, worthy of getting a second chance to run a big program in my mind. And, to be determined whether this would be the right fit, whether it's something that he would even be interested in with how much success he's been able to bring to Dayton. But yes, I think it's a fascinating sort of link there to make. Anytime that one of these jobs comes open, Anthony Grant is a really good basketball coach, and any team should definitely consider hiring him if they are in the market. Now we get to the final two here. This is going to be the obvious one. All right, this is every head coaching vacancy for every size of high major school is going to bring this name up. It's Will Wade at McNeese. Will Wade, of course, was the LSU head coach. He was the VCU head coach before that. He had great success. Had LSU in the top 25, had them competing. They had 5-star recruits coming through there, but then we learned why. And Will Wade got a little head start on NIL. Got caught on wiretaps. He ends up getting a show cause. Well, that expires after this season. So a team can now hire him without penalty. That's going to be the story to watch as he surveys which job is going to be the best for him to take. You don't have to worry about paying these fines. It's going to be so much easier to get access to Will Wade this summer versus some of the teams that probably had interest in him last year. But again, you bring a lot of eyes to your program when you go against what the NCAA wants, especially with 1 year away from being able to do it with kind of a clean slate there. And finally, this is the one I'm going to bring up, and it's a name to watch. I'm not saying that there's any direct ties between this, but I'm looking at Buzz Williams at Texas A&M. Buzz Williams, throughout his coaching career, you can go back and look, tends to spend as a head coach somewhere between 5 to 6 years at each spot. That's generally been kind of his philosophy. There's a lot of reasons for that. I think one is kind of a leadership philosophy of change over time. I think there's also a level of finding a new challenge. Buzz Williams is a guy who he's not like some basketball coaches who just live, breathe, just everything is basketball. He's a guy who's fascinated by a lot of things, and part of his energy level, I think, is his ability to always be in love with everything he's doing in the moment. And so finding a new challenge for himself, he goes from Marquette to Virginia Tech. That wasn't necessarily a big leap for him as head coach. But he makes the leap from Marquette to Virginia Tech because he was ready for a new challenge. Then he makes the leap from Virginia Tech to Texas A&M. You can make an argument for whether that's a big leap up. I think it's definitely a step up, if nothing else. But he makes that leap, and now he's got a new challenge in front of him. Well, is Texas A&M this big golden kind of achievement for him, and he's going to play out his time there? Or is he going to eventually take a look and say that he's ready for a new challenge? That's what people will have to figure out. And I think it's why, if I'm Miami, I'm at least gauging whether he's at that point, whether he's near that point. If Buzz Williams doesn't view Texas A&M as just this job that he's going to hold on to as long as he can, then if I'm Miami, I'm trying to get something done there. The other reasons, just these little small things that I think that Buzz Williams' name could at least pop up. I mentioned those major ones there. But I also look at Buzz Williams, who's a very, very big relationship guy. That is his biggest concern when he's coaching. You hear a lot of guys talk about caring about the players. Buzz Williams really does. You had Boots Radford last year. He started his career with Buzz at Virginia Tech, ends up coming to Texas A&M, spends all of his time there. So a deep relationship between the coach and the player there. And last year being his last year, Buzz Williams was like emotional, talking about what it meant to coach him for that long, across those many years. Well, at the end of this year, he loses a pretty big class of players who have been with him for quite some time. The headline of that, of course, being Wade Taylor. Wade Taylor has been his point guard. And Buzz Williams has defended him left and right throughout his college career. And so you talk about Boots Radford being gone. You talk about Wade Taylor being gone. I mean, other players who have been there with him for an extended amount of time who will be gone. You got Jace Carter, who's been there 2 years now. Henry Coleman, that's a big one. Anderson Garcia, Hayden Hefner, Manny Obaseki. And then also, excuse me, I think that's the end of the list. Oh, the other one is, of course, CJ Wilcher. Sorry, trying to make sure I got all those names listed there. The point is, though, there's a lot of turnover coming at Texas A&M, one way or another. And it could be that Buzz Williams views that as his new challenge to overturn this thing. But perhaps he's looking for a new challenge altogether. We will see. Time will tell what happens there. And college basketball is always rolling. So we will speak with you on Thursday about all the latest news in college basketball. Thanks for tuning in here to the 3 True Values mailbag episode.